The fluorescent lights of St. Mary's Hospital cast their familiar cold glow across the administrative wing as Marcus Richardson sat rigidly in the leather chair opposite Dr. Helen Crawford's mahogany desk. His hands, usually steady from years of architectural precision, trembled slightly as he gripped the manila folder containing his medical files. The diagnosis had been delivered 3 weeks prior with the clinical detachment that only seasoned oncologists could muster: stage 3 pancreatic adenocarcinoma with a 5% 5-year survival rate. Marcus had built his life on control, on the meticulous planning that had earned him recognition as one of the city's most sought-after architects. His buildings stood as monuments to precision, each beam calculated, every angle deliberate. But cancer, he discovered, was the ultimate architect of chaos, redesigning his carefully constructed existence with ruthless efficiency. "I want the best," Marcus stated firmly, his voice carrying the authority that had commanded boardrooms and construction sites. "I don't care about cost, connections, or convenience. I need the surgeon with the highest success rate for this type of procedure. The one who gives me the best chance." Dr. Crawford adjusted her wire-rimmed glasses and studied his file with the practiced eye of someone who had navigated these conversations countless times. She understood the desperation that drove patients to make such demands, the human instinct to grasp for any advantage when facing mortality. In her 15 years of practice, she had seen the wealthy attempt to purchase miracles and the poor resign themselves to fate, but rarely had she encountered such unwavering determination paired with genuine humility. "Marcus, I need you to understand that this surgery is incredibly complex. The Whipple procedure, combined with your tumor's location, means we're looking at a 12-hour operation with significant risks. The surgeon I have in mind has the best statistics in the region, possibly the country, for cases like yours." Marcus leaned forward, his steel-gray eyes fixed on hers with laser intensity. "Then, that's who I want. What's his name? Which hospital is he affiliated with? I can transfer immediately." Dr. Crawford paused, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Actually, the surgeon's name is Dr. Alex Chen, and they're already here at St. Mary's. But, Marcus, there's something you should know about Dr. Chen before you make your final decision." The confidence in Marcus's voice didn't waver. "If they're the best, nothing else matters. My ego isn't worth my life." Those words would echo in his mind repeatedly over the coming weeks, taking on layers of meaning he couldn't yet comprehend. Dr. Crawford made a note in his file and reached for her phone. "I'll arrange for you to meet Dr. Chen tomorrow morning. The pre-surgical consultation is scheduled for 8 a.m. in the surgical wing." That evening, Marcus sat in his penthouse apartment overlooking the city skyline, surrounded by the architectural awards and accolades that had defined his professional identity. The irony wasn't lost on him that he, who had spent decades creating structures meant to last centuries, was now fighting a battle where success was measured in months and years of survival. He poured himself a glass of aged whiskey, one of the few indulgences his diagnosis hadn't yet claimed, and contemplated the strange turns life could take. His reflection was interrupted by a call from his younger brother David, a man who had chosen the stability of middle management over the risks and rewards of entrepreneurship. Their relationship had always been cordial but distant, marked by the unspoken competition that often exists between siblings who chose vastly different paths. "How are you holding up?" David asked, his voice carrying genuine concern tempered by the awkwardness of someone unused to discussing mortality. "I'm meeting with the surgeon tomorrow. Dr. Crawford says they're the best in the region for this type of procedure." "That's good news. What hospital are they at?" "Here at St. Mary's, actually. Dr. Alex Chen. I'll know more after tomorrow." David's pause was barely perceptible, but Marcus caught it. "That's great, Mark. I'm sure everything will work out." After ending the call, Marcus wondered about his brother's hesitation but dismissed it as typical David caution. He spent the remainder of the evening reviewing his architectural firm's current projects, ensuring that his associates could continue his work should the surgery not go as planned. It was a morbid exercise in legacy management, but one that provided him with a sense of control in an increasingly unpredictable situation. The next morning arrived with the kind of autumn crispness that made Marcus grateful for consciousness, for the simple ability to feel the cool air against his skin. He arrived at St. Mary's 40 minutes early, a habit born from years of treating punctuality as a competitive advantage. The surgical wing smelled of antiseptic and determination, a combination that somehow felt appropriate for the gravity of his situation. Dr. Crawford met him in the consultation room, her expression more guarded than it had been the previous day. "Marcus, before Dr. Chen arrives, I want to reiterate that they are absolutely the best choice for your surgery. Their success rates are remarkable, their technique is innovative, and their dedication to patient care is unparalleled." The emphasis in her voice suggested subtext that Marcus couldn't quite decode. "Dr. Crawford, you seem concerned about something. Is there an issue with Dr. Chen's availability?" "Not at all. Dr. Chen is fully committed to your case. I just want to ensure that you're prepared to focus on what truly matters here, your survival." Before Marcus could respond, there was a gentle knock on the door. Dr. Crawford called for the visitor to enter, and Marcus turned to greet the surgeon who would hold his life in their hands. What he saw challenged every assumption he had unconsciously harbored about surgical excellence. Dr. Alex Chen appeared to be in their early 30s, with an androgynous appearance that made determining gender immediately impossible. They stood perhaps 5 feet 6 inches tall, with a slight build that seemed almost delicate compared to Marcus's mental image of surgical authority. Their dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and their scrubs bore the comfortable wear of someone who practically lived in the operating room. "Mr. Richardson," Dr. Chen extended a firm handshake, their voice warm but professionally modulated. "I'm Alex Chen. I've reviewed your case extensively, and I believe we have an excellent chance of achieving a positive outcome." Marcus found himself momentarily speechless, not from any prejudice, but from the sudden recognition of his own unconscious biases. He had expected someone older, more traditionally authoritative in appearance, someone who matched the gravitas of the situation. Dr. Chen's youthful appearance and gentle demeanor seemed inconsistent with the life and death responsibility they carried. "Doctor," Marcus managed, recovering his composure. "Dr. Crawford tells me you have the best success rates for this type of procedure." Dr. Chen settled into their chair with the easy confidence of someone completely comfortable with their expertise. "Over the past 5 years, I've performed 137 Whipple procedures with various complications similar to yours. My patient survival rate at 1 year post-surgery is 87%, and at 5 years, it's 43%. The national averages are 68% and 21%, respectively." The statistics hit Marcus like architectural blueprints, precise, measurable, and irrefutable. "Those are remarkable numbers. They represent remarkable patients," Dr. Chen replied. "People who trusted in the process and committed to the difficult work of recovery. Your case will require removing the head of your pancreas, part of your small intestine, your gallbladder, and potentially a portion of your stomach. We'll then reconstruct your digestive system. It's extensive, but very much within my wheelhouse." Marcus studied Dr. Chen's face as they explained the procedure, noting the quiet confidence that emanated from their words. There was something almost unsettling about such authority coming from someone who looked like they could be fresh out of residency. "How long have you been performing these surgeries?" "I completed my residency 8 years ago, followed by a fellowship in hepatopancreatobiliary surgery at Johns Hopkins. I've been the lead surgeon here for 4 years. Dr. Chen pulled up Marcus's scans on the room's computer monitor. "Your tumor is located here, adjacent to several critical blood vessels, which increases the complexity. However, the imaging suggests we caught it before major vascular involvement." As Dr. Chen explained the surgical approach, their demeanor transformed. The gentle bedside manner gave way to an intensity that reminded Marcus of himself when discussing structural engineering challenges. Every word was precise, every gesture deliberate, and every explanation revealed layers of knowledge that could only come from extensive experience and natural aptitude. "Dr. Chen," Marcus interrupted, "I have to ask, and please don't take offense, but you seem quite young for someone with such impressive statistics." Dr. Chen smiled, an expression that somehow conveyed both understanding and mild amusement. "I'm 34, Mr. Richardson. I understand your concern. Most patients expect their surgeon to have gray hair and decades of visible experience. But surgical skill isn't determined by age or appearance. It's determined by training, dedication, and an ability to make critical decisions under pressure. Marcus felt a flush of embarrassment at his transparent skepticism. "You're right, of course. I apologize if I seemed no apology necessary. You're entrusting me with your life. Due diligence is not only appropriate, it's smart." Dr. Chen turned back to the monitor. "Would you like to speak with some of my previous patients? Dr. Crawford can arrange that." The offer caught Marcus off guard. Few professionals in any field willingly subjected themselves to client references for such high-stakes situations. "That would be helpful, yes." Dr. Crawford spoke up. "I can have 3 patients contact you this afternoon. All had similar diagnoses and procedures." As the consultation continued, Marcus found himself grudgingly impressed by Dr. Chen's thoroughness. They discussed every aspect of the surgery, potential complications, recovery timeline, and post-operative care with a precision that matched Marcus's own approach to complex architectural projects. By the time they finished, nearly 2 hours had passed. "One last question," Marcus said as Dr. Chen prepared to leave. "What drives you to do this work? Surgery like this, with these stakes, it must be incredibly demanding." Dr. Chen paused at the door, considering the question with apparent seriousness. "Every person who comes through that door is someone's everything, someone's parent, child, partner, friend. They're trusting me with their future, with all the dreams and experiences they haven't yet had. That responsibility is both humbling and motivating. I don't take it lightly." The honesty in Dr. Chen's voice dispelled Marcus's remaining doubts about their commitment. After they left, he sat alone with Dr. Crawford, processing the encounter. "You were testing me," he said finally. Dr. Crawford nodded. "Alex is brilliant, Marcus. But I've seen patients reject their care based on assumptions about age, appearance, or other irrelevant factors. I needed to know that you could see past superficial expectations." Marcus considered this as he left the hospital. The 3 patient references Dr. Crawford had promised called within hours, each offering testimonials that bordered on reverence for Dr. Chen's skill and dedication. One patient, a 68-year-old retired teacher named Margaret, had been given a 10% chance of survival 18 months earlier. She now spoke of planning her granddaughter's wedding. That evening, Marcus called Dr. Crawford to confirm his decision. "Schedule the surgery with Dr. Chen. When can we proceed?" "Next Tuesday morning. The procedure is scheduled to begin at 6 a.m. As Marcus hung up the phone, he realized that his initial disappointment at Dr. Chen's youthful appearance had revealed something uncomfortable about his own prejudices. He had built his career on the principle that good design transcended superficial expectations, yet he had almost allowed those same superficial judgments to influence a decision about his own survival. The irony was sharp. He who prided himself on recognizing substance over style had nearly fallen victim to the very superficiality he claimed to despise. It was a humbling recognition, one that suggested his upcoming surgery might involve more than just the removal of cancerous tissue. Part 2, the arrival of truth. The days leading up to surgery passed with the strange combination of acceleration and suspension that accompanies life-altering events. Marcus found himself obsessing over details he had never previously considered: the texture of his morning coffee, the angle of sunlight through his apartment windows, the weight of his architectural pencils as he made final notations on current projects. Each sensation carried the heightened significance of potentially being among his last. His architectural firm, Richardson & Associates, had been his life's work for nearly 2 decades. The current projects represented millions of dollars in civic improvements, a children's hospital wing, a sustainable housing development, and a downtown cultural center that would bear his name if completed. Marcus spent his pre-surgery days ensuring that his design intentions were thoroughly documented, not from morbidity, but from the same meticulous nature that had built his reputation. On the Friday before his Tuesday surgery, Marcus received an unexpected visitor at his office. His assistant announced that Dr. Chen was waiting in the conference room, an unusual occurrence that immediately triggered Marcus's anxiety. Surgeons didn't typically make house calls to architectural firms. Dr. Chen stood examining Marcus's scale model of the cultural center when he entered, their scrubs replaced by dark jeans and a simple gray sweater that somehow made them appear even younger. The afternoon light streaming through the conference room windows highlighted the concentration on their face as they studied the miniature building. "This is remarkable work," Dr. Chen said without turning around. "The integration of natural light with functional space, it's like surgical planning, but permanent." Marcus joined them at the model, surprised by the comparison. Architecture and surgery do share certain principles. Precision, planning, understanding how systems interact. Dr. Chen finally looked at him, their expression more serious than it had been during their hospital consultation. "That's actually why I'm here. I wanted to discuss something about your surgery that goes beyond the medical aspects." The gravity in Dr. Chen's voice sent a chill through Marcus. "Is there a complication? Something wrong with the preoperative tests?" "No, medically everything looks excellent. Your preparation has been exemplary." Dr. Chen moved to the conference table and gestured for Marcus to sit. "But I've learned that successful surgery often depends as much on a patient's psychological readiness as their physical condition. And I'm concerned that you may be approaching this procedure with expectations that could interfere with your recovery." Marcus felt defensive. "I'm committed to following all post-operative instructions. I understand the importance of Dr. Chen raised a gentle hand. "It's not about compliance. It's about identity. You've built your entire sense of self around control, achievement, and professional excellence. Cancer and major surgery are going to challenge those foundations in ways you may not anticipate." The observation was uncomfortably accurate. Marcus had indeed structured his life around the belief that sufficient planning and effort could overcome most obstacles. Cancer had already begun to erode that worldview, but he hadn't fully acknowledged the implications. "Dr. Chen, I appreciate your concern, but I'm psychologically prepared for this surgery." Dr. Chen studied him with the same intensity they had shown when examining his medical scans. "Marcus, may I share something personal with you?" The request was unexpected, but Marcus nodded. 3 years ago, I had a patient very similar to you. Successful businessman, used to being in control, accustomed to achieving whatever he set his mind to. The surgery was technically perfect, one of my best outcomes from a medical standpoint. But he struggled severely during recovery because he couldn't accept the temporary loss of control, the dependence on others, the uncertainty of his future. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "What happened to him?" "He eventually recovered fully, but it took much longer than necessary because he fought against the natural healing process. He wanted to dictate the timeline, manage every variable, control outcomes that are ultimately beyond anyone's control." Dr. Chen leaned forward slightly. "I don't want you to experience that same struggle." The parallel was obvious, and Marcus resented its accuracy. "So what are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that your greatest strength as an architect, your need to control and perfect every detail, might become your greatest obstacle as a patient. Recovery requires a different kind of strength, the ability to trust, to be patient, to accept help." Marcus stood and walked to the window overlooking the city skyline, his architectural legacy spread before him in glass and steel. "Dr. Chen, I've succeeded by never accepting limitations. That attitude got me through poverty, through educational challenges, through business failures. You're asking me to abandon the approach that built everything I have." Dr. Chen joined him at the window. "I'm asking you to expand it. The man who built these buildings had to learn when to be flexible, when to adapt to unexpected conditions, when to trust his team. Surgery and recovery will require those same skills." Marcus turned to face the surgeon who would soon hold his life in their hands. "You're saying I need to change who I am to survive this?" "I'm saying you need to discover who you are beyond your professional achievements. The Marcus Richardson who deserves to survive isn't just the successful architect. It's the human being underneath all those accomplishments." The conversation left Marcus deeply unsettled. That evening, he found himself questioning assumptions he had held for decades. His success had been built on the belief that personal strength meant self-reliance, that vulnerability was weakness, that asking for help indicated failure. Dr. Chen's words suggested that these core beliefs might actually hinder his recovery. He called his brother David, something he rarely did without a specific purpose. "I'm having second thoughts about the surgery," Marcus said without preamble. David's concern was immediate. "What's wrong? Did something change medically?" "No, it's not that. Dr. Chen came to see me today. They think I'm psychologically unprepared." "Mark, you're the most prepared person I know. You've researched everything, spoken to other patients, followed every preoperative instruction." Marcus realized that David couldn't understand because David had never built his identity around total self-sufficiency. "It's more complicated than that. They're suggesting that my personality, the drive that made me successful, might actually work against me during recovery." There was a long pause before David responded. "Mark, do you remember when Dad had his heart attack?" Marcus did remember. Their father had been a proud man, a factory worker who had never asked anyone for anything. Even during his recovery, he had resisted help, pushed himself too hard, and ultimately suffered a second, fatal heart attack because he couldn't accept the limitations his condition required. "Dad died because he was too stubborn to follow doctor's orders," David continued. "You're not him, but you have some of the same traits. Maybe Dr. Chen is trying to save you from making similar mistakes." That night, Marcus lay awake contemplating the parallels between his father's experience and his current situation. The man who had taught him that strength meant never showing weakness, never asking for help, never accepting limitations. The same man whose rigid self-reliance had ultimately killed him. The weekend passed in a haze of preparation and introspection. Marcus found himself paying attention to aspects of his life he had previously taken for granted: the ease with which he performed simple tasks, the assumption that his body would respond predictably to his commands, the luxury of planning beyond the immediate future. Dr. Chen's words had opened a door to awareness he wasn't sure he wanted to enter. Monday evening, the night before surgery, Marcus sat in his study surrounded by architectural drawings and awards, trying to write letters to the people who mattered to him. The exercise proved more difficult than expected, not because he lacked things to say, but because he realized how little he had shared of himself with anyone. His professional relationships were built on competence and achievement, his personal relationships were sparse and largely superficial. The letter to David proved especially challenging. "David, if something happens tomorrow, I want you to know that I've always admired your ability to find contentment in family and simple pleasures. I built my life around achievement and recognition, but you built yours around relationships and joy. If I survive this surgery, I want to learn from your example." As he sealed the envelope, Marcus realized that Dr. Chen had been right about something fundamental. He had defined himself so completely through his professional success that he had little sense of who he might be without it. The upcoming surgery would strip away his ability to work, to control, to achieve in the ways that had always given his life meaning. For the first time since his diagnosis, Marcus felt genuinely afraid, not of death, but of discovering that there might be nothing substantial underneath the professional persona he had spent decades constructing. What if, when the surgery was over and he could no longer define himself through architectural achievement, he found that there was no essential Marcus Richardson to recover? The night before surgery, he called Dr. Chen's office and left a message. "Dr. Chen, this is Marcus Richardson. I wanted you to know that I understand what you were trying to tell me on Friday. I'm scared, not just of the surgery, but of what comes after. I don't know how to be a person who can't control outcomes, but I'm willing to learn. See you in the morning." As he tried to sleep, Marcus reflected on the strange journey that had brought him to this point. He had requested the best surgeon and been shocked not by who arrived, but by what their arrival had revealed about his own limitations and misconceptions. Dr. Chen had proven to be exactly what he needed, not just a skilled surgeon, but someone who could see beyond his professional facade to the frightened human being underneath. The man who had built his life on strength was about to discover what true strength actually meant. Part 3, The Destroyer of Weakness. The pre-dawn hours of surgery day arrived with the kind of clarity that only comes when all pretense has been stripped away. Marcus woke at 4 a.m. without an alarm, his mind sharp and strangely peaceful despite, or perhaps because of, the magnitude of what lay ahead. He had spent the night in a surprisingly deep sleep, as if his subconscious had finally accepted what his conscious mind had been fighting, that control was an illusion, and surrender might actually be a form of strength. His morning routine was deliberately simple: a shower, comfortable clothes, and a single cup of coffee, his last for weeks. As he prepared to leave for the hospital, Marcus caught his reflection in the bathroom mirror. The man looking back appeared older than his 53 years, marked by weeks of anxiety and the weight of confronting his own mortality. But there was something else in his eyes that hadn't been there before, a kind of resigned determination that felt different from his usual aggressive pursuit of goals. The drive to St. Mary's Hospital took place in the strange suspended time that precedes life-altering events. The city was just beginning to wake up, early commuters and delivery trucks sharing the roads with a man heading toward the most important appointment of his life. Marcus found himself noticing details with unusual intensity: the way the morning light hit the facades of buildings he had driven past thousands of times, the geometric patterns created by traffic lights and power lines, the simple fact that the world continued its routine indifferent to his personal crisis. David was waiting in the hospital lobby when Marcus arrived, an unexpected gesture that carried more emotional weight than either brother would typically acknowledge. They had never been demonstrative with each other, but David's presence communicated volumes about the bonds that transcend daily interactions. "You didn't need to come this early," Marcus said, though his gratitude was evident. "Yes, I did," David replied simply. "This is what family does." The preoperative preparation unfolded with the mechanical efficiency that characterizes modern healthcare. Blood pressure, temperature, weight, medical history verification, each step moving Marcus closer to a point of no return. The nursing staff treated him with the kind of professional compassion that managed to be both reassuring and sobering. They had done this countless times, but they understood it was his first. Dr. Chen appeared at 5:30 a.m., now transformed into their surgical persona. Gone was the casual sweater and thoughtful demeanor of their office visit. In its place was focused intensity clothed in scrubs and an aura of quiet confidence. The change was remarkable and somehow reassuring. This was clearly someone stepping into their element. "Good morning, Marcus. How are you feeling?" "Ready," Marcus answered, surprised to realize he meant it. Dr. Chen studied his face with the same careful attention they had shown his medical scans. "I can see that you are. That's going to make all the difference." The anesthesiologist arrived for the final consultation, explaining the process of induced unconsciousness with clinical precision. Marcus listened carefully, but found his attention drawn to Dr. Chen, who was reviewing surgical notes with the concentrated focus of someone about to perform an extraordinarily complex task. There was something almost meditative about their preparation, a quiet ritual of readiness that conveyed both the gravity and routine nature of their work. As they wheeled Marcus toward the operating room, he experienced a moment of profound clarity about the journey that had brought him to this point. 6 months ago, he would never have imagined trusting his life to someone who challenged his preconceptions so fundamentally. His initial reaction to Dr. Chen, the surprise at their youth, the questioning of their capability, now seemed like artifacts of a different person's thinking. The operating room itself was a monument to technological precision: gleaming instruments arranged with geometric perfection, monitors displaying incomprehensible data, powerful lights positioned to eliminate any shadow. Marcus recognized the aesthetic of functional design. The same principles that guided his architectural work applied to the most consequential environment possible. "Marcus," Dr. Chen's voice cut through his observations. "Before we begin, I want you to remember something. The next few hours belong to me and my team. Your job is to rest and let us do ours. When you wake up, your job will be to focus on healing, not on controlling the process. Can you do that?" Marcus met Dr. Chen's eyes, seeing in them the same intensity he brought to his most challenging architectural projects. "I can do that." The anesthesiologist began administering medication, and Marcus felt consciousness beginning to ebb away. His last coherent thought was a recognition of the irony: in order to save his life, he had to completely surrender control of it. The 12 hours that followed existed outside of Marcus's experience, but they would later be described to him in detail by Dr. Chen. The tumor was exactly where the scans had indicated, but its relationship to critical blood vessels was even more complex than anticipated. The surgery required not just the planned removal of organs, but delicate work around the superior mesenteric artery that added 3 hours to the procedure. Dr. Chen later told him that moments like these, when surgical plans encounter unexpected realities, reveal the difference between competent surgeons and exceptional ones. The ability to adapt, to make critical decisions under pressure, to maintain focus during hours of meticulous work, separated those who merely perform procedures from those who save lives. At one point during the surgery, Dr. Chen faced a choice between a technically easier approach that would leave Marcus with significant functional limitations and a more challenging technique that offered better long-term outcomes. Without hesitation, they chose the more difficult path, spending an additional 2 hours ensuring that Marcus's post-surgical quality of life would be optimal. The decision embodied something Dr. Chen had learned early in their career, that true strength as a surgeon came not from taking the safest or easiest route, but from having the courage to pursue the best possible outcome for the patient, regardless of the personal cost in time, energy, or professional risk. Marcus emerged from anesthesia 15 hours after the surgery began, his consciousness returning gradually like morning light filtering through heavy curtains. His first sensation was not pain, as he had expected, but a profound sense of displacement. His body felt foreign, as if it belonged to someone else. Tubes and wires connected him to various machines, and the simple act of breathing required conscious effort. Dr. Chen was there when his eyes fully opened, their expression showing the exhaustion of someone who had just completed one of the most demanding procedures in their field. But underneath the fatigue was unmistakable satisfaction. "Welcome back," Dr. Chen said softly. "The surgery went very well. We were able to remove all visible cancer while preserving maximum function." Marcus tried to speak but found his throat too dry. Dr. Chen anticipated his need and provided ice chips, a simple gesture that somehow carried enormous emotional weight. In that moment, Marcus understood viscerally what Dr. Chen had been trying to tell him about the nature of recovery. It would require accepting help for the most basic needs, finding strength in vulnerability rather than self-sufficiency. "How long?" Marcus finally managed to whisper. 15 hours. Longer than planned, but we encountered some complications that required additional work. Everything went well. Over the following days, Marcus experienced an education in humility unlike anything his professional life had provided. Simple tasks he had performed unconsciously for decades, eating, walking, even sitting up, now required assistance and enormous effort. The nursing staff guided him through each stage of recovery with patient expertise, helping him navigate a landscape where progress was measured in tiny increments rather than dramatic achievements. The physical challenges were significant, but the psychological adjustment proved even more profound. Marcus discovered that his identity had been so thoroughly tied to professional capability that its temporary absence left him feeling fundamentally unmoored. Without the ability to work, to achieve, to control outcomes, who was he? The answer came gradually, revealed through interactions with hospital staff, phone calls from friends and colleagues, and especially through David's daily visits. Marcus began to recognize qualities in himself that had nothing to do with architectural accomplishment: his curiosity about other people's lives, his dry sense of humor, his capacity for gratitude, his ability to find beauty in small moments. Dr. Chen stopped by each morning during rounds, and these brief conversations became a form of education. They discussed not just medical progress, but the psychological challenges of recovery. Dr. Chen shared insights from their years of helping patients navigate the transition from illness back to health, lessons about patience, acceptance, and redefining strength. The patients who recover most successfully, Dr. Chen explained during one visit, are those who learn to see this period not as a departure from their real life, but as a different chapter of it. The strength required for healing is different from the strength required for achievement, but it's no less valuable. Marcus found himself thinking about Dr. Chen's words in the context of his broader life philosophy. He had spent decades believing that strength meant never showing weakness, never accepting help, never acknowledging limitations. But observing Dr. Chen's approach to surgery and patient care had revealed a different model of strength, one that embraced vulnerability as a source of connection, that saw asking for help as wisdom rather than failure, that understood true power as the ability to adapt rather than control. 3 weeks after surgery, as Marcus took his first unassisted walk around the hospital ward, he realized that something fundamental had shifted in his understanding of himself. The man who had entered the hospital had defined strength as the ability to impose his will on the world. The man who was slowly walking these halls understood strength as the courage to let the world reshape him when necessary. Dr. Chen found him during that walk, observing his progress with the same careful attention they had shown his medical scans weeks earlier. "How are you feeling?" "Different," Marcus answered honestly. "Not just physically, but fundamentally different." Dr. Chen nodded with understanding. "That's not uncommon. Experiences like this tend to clarify what really matters." "What feels different?" Marcus paused, trying to articulate insights that were still forming. "I used to think that strength meant never needing anyone. But, these past weeks, I've needed help for everything: eating, walking, basic care. And, I've discovered that accepting that help doesn't make me weak. It makes me human." "And, what does that mean for your future?" Marcus looked down the hospital corridor, seeing it now not as a place of institutional care but as an environment where people dedicated their lives to helping others through their most vulnerable moments. "I'm not sure yet. But, I know I want to build things that serve people the way this place serves them. Not just impressive buildings, but spaces that recognize human fragility and dignity." Dr. Chen smiled, the first time Marcus had seen them express unguarded pleasure. "That sounds like wisdom." As Marcus continued his recovery over the following months, he found himself fundamentally changed by the experience of radical dependence. The architectural projects he returned to reflected this transformation: designs that prioritized accessibility over impressiveness, spaces that acknowledged human limitations rather than celebrating only human achievement. His relationship with David deepened as Marcus learned to value connection over competition. He began seeking out the stories of his surgical nurses, discovering lives of remarkable dedication and resilience that had previously been invisible to him. He started volunteering with cancer support groups, using his experience to help others navigate the psychological challenges of serious illness. Most significantly, Marcus developed a lasting relationship with Dr. Chen that evolved from doctor-patient to something approaching friendship. Their conversations revealed the surgeon's own journey toward understanding strength and vulnerability. Dr. Chen shared how their petite stature and youthful appearance had initially been obstacles to gaining patient trust, but had ultimately taught them that authority came from competence and compassion rather than physical presence or conventional expectations. "I used to think I had to prove myself by being harder, more aggressive, more traditionally masculine than my colleagues," Dr. Chen admitted during one of their post-recovery conversations. "But I learned that my greatest surgical successes came when I embraced qualities that are sometimes seen as weaknesses: intuition, gentleness, emotional intelligence." Marcus recognized the parallel to his own transformation. Both of them had discovered that strength was not about conforming to external expectations of power, but about having the courage to be authentically themselves while serving something larger than their own ego. A year after his surgery, Marcus stood in the completed cultural center that bore his name, but his pride in the building had nothing to do with personal recognition. The space featured wheelchair accessibility that exceeded code requirements, quiet areas for people experiencing illness or disability, and design elements that acknowledged the full spectrum of human experience rather than celebrating only health and achievement. During the building's dedication ceremony, Marcus spoke about the unexpected lessons of his cancer journey. He talked about the surgeon who had challenged his preconceptions about authority and competence, about the nurses who had taught him that accepting help was a form of wisdom, about the discovery that true strength sometimes required complete surrender. "The man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others," Marcus concluded his remarks, "but first we must have the courage to recognize what weakness actually is. I thought weakness was needing help, showing vulnerability, acknowledging limitations. I learned that real weakness is the refusal to grow, to change, to become more than we were." As the ceremony concluded, Marcus spotted Dr. Chen in the crowd, their presence typically understated but somehow essential to the moment. They exchanged a look of mutual recognition, two people who had discovered that their greatest professional challenges had become their most important teachers. The building around them stood as a monument not to Marcus's architectural genius, but to the lesson that true strength emerges when we have the courage to let our circumstances reshape us. Every accessible entrance, every quiet healing space, every design element that prioritized human dignity over aesthetic impressiveness reflected the wisdom he had gained by surrendering control to a surgeon who looked nothing like his expectations but embodied everything he needed to learn about authentic power. In the end, Marcus had requested the best surgeon and been shocked not by who arrived, but by what their arrival revealed about the nature of excellence itself. Dr. Chen had been the perfect surgeon for him not despite their unconventional appearance, but because their journey to authority had taught them the same lesson Marcus needed to learn, that strength is not about meeting external expectations, but about having the courage to become who we actually are, regardless of what others expect us to be. The man who had built his identity around never showing weakness had learned that his greatest strength would come from embracing his own humanity completely. And, in that embrace, he had found not just physical healing, but the foundation for a life of greater authenticity, connection, and purpose than he had ever imagined possible.